Smith.
Thanks very much, and thank you for your contribution today. It's very, very important that you're here, and I think that you talk at the beginning, Patricia King, about the moral and social imperative for policymakers to ensure that the workers in Bord don't become, and their communities, don't become collateral damage. And I'd like to assume that you're addressing us, that we have here in this committee a moral and social imperative to ensure that doesn't happen. Now, the final say isn't with us, but about a week ago we had a 2-hour discussion for statements on what's happening in Bord and at that the Minister said, when it was put to him, that the company are refusing to go to the WRC. The Minister said that they are engaging with the what's it called, the Joint Industrial Council. And that was it. When asked would he tell them to go to the WRC, he refused to answer that question. Now, you said in your closing terms, somebody has to say to Bord and management to sort this out. Would that person be the Minister? And should the Minister go and tell them to get into the WRC to engage in a meaningful way? Do you think he will? Do you think he should? And do you think that that's his role?
Through the Chair, the answer to that question is yes, we think it should be the Minister, the main shareholder of the company behaving in this fashion, given the absolute urgency around this. Yes, we think. I certainly, with the group of unions, spent an hour and 40 minutes trying to convince him that this was the only route and that he needed to do it and it needed to happen urgently. 8 weeks later, it still hasn't happened, and actually the refusals have been more, I think, forthright now coming from the company. So, as you can imagine, for us who are trying to and who are engaged in trying to represent the best interests of the workers we represent, it is highly frustrating. I have to say, even on a personal level, I've chased this around now like a cat chasing a mouse for the last 3 weeks, and have gone to all the doors, knocked on all the doors. Some of them opened, some of them didn't. But there are very senior people in Bord and Mona who have decided we're not doing this. And that's it. OK, so if they're becoming more entrenched in their view, we're not going to the WRC, and the Minister has spent the last 8 weeks obfuscating and not telling them to do so, and we have a moral and social imperative to ensure that these workers are not dumped on the scrap heap, shouldn't we now in this committee write to the Minister and say, as a result of our discussions and this forum today, we want him to go and tell Bord and Mona to engage in a meaningful way with the workers, the communities and their representatives to look for a just transition. Would you agree with that? I would agree with it, and it was one of the things I spoke to the team before we came in here, and I said, and obviously we're often invited over to various different Oireachtas committees. I said this is one of the most important you'll ever be invited to, and there's one message we need to get across here, and it's precisely what you have set out there and what I have tried, I hope, to set out with clarity to this committee. That needs to happen, and there is no time to waste here. This needs to happen immediately.
OK, well, I think that should be a conclusion of our engagement with you today, one of the things that comes from it. Just to ask you, if you really believe how urgent, and I agree with you and you've outlined it and we've heard it time and time again, how urgent and how crucial this is, if the Minister refuses to do that, and if Bord and Mona remains resolute in its opposition to entering talks in the WRC, what course of action is left to the ICTU, to the unions and to the workers and the communities? What else can they do, given that 2/3 of them are already let go, and as Mr Nunes just said, the other third might be gone by March?
Yeah, well, I have to be careful when I want to answer that, because as you well know, when you're planning a strategy, you don't tell everybody in public what you're going to do. But what I would say through the Chair is the reason this becomes more and more urgent is the company know very well how many people are going out of the system. You know the consequences of that because you know how the trade union movement operates, because you worked in it, so you know it very well. I know it as well. So I'll say no more than that, but it leads you to a place which is not a happy outcome, which is very dismal for all the workers concerned, and it's the reason we are fighting so hard to have this matter addressed immediately.
Very good. And recently the Cabinet, or members of the Cabinet, made a visit to the Midlands in order to reassure and reassert that this is all going very well and it's all lovely. Could you give us your view of that visit? Did it achieve anything?
Well, as I didn't go down to it, but Willie did attend it. But for my part, I will just say ministers are always welcome to go and meet with workers and meet with the people concerned. That's, from our point of view, positive. But it hasn't answered the question, and it hasn't got. Had we got a letter the next day, which said the company are now going to take part in the forum, I would have regarded that as a successful outcome to that visit, but we're still waiting for it. Okay,
one last question, if I have time for it, and it's on this question of the models that we can look to in other countries, and there seems to be a load of them. In fact, I think, Paul McGoldrick-Kelly, were you at the NERI presentation? You were, and you used the model of, I think it was Germany and Sweden. There's also other models that aren't mentioned in your presentation. But just on the Plan del Carbon, because my understanding is that the coal workers affected, numerically mirror that of the Bord na Móna workers in terms of the amount. 250 million that was agreed to create a just transition plan in northern Spain. Did any of that come from the EU Globalisation Fund? I'm a bit confused about where funding may or may not be available, because about a year ago, the former minister, Dennis Naughton, I think you indicated to us that there would be an application made to the EU Globalisation Fund to help with just transition. I don't want to cross thing, but you can clarify it. If this minister, the minister we have currently, cannot apply, because that's what he told us, that it has to be the Minister for Education, Mary Mitchell O'Connor, what is the absolute purpose of that fund? Is it just to send these workers to Athlone College of Education or to some other skills college? Or did the 250 million that was injected into the Plan del Carbon help with the pensions, for starters, and ultimately for the redundancy payments? Is there any other way that, beyond the resources that this state has, that help can be given for the just transition in the Midlands?
Okay, well, just for my part, and I wouldn't regard myself now as an expert on what happened in Spain, so I just say that to you from the very beginning, but I would say this. The purpose of getting that forum together is to build all that information, ask all those questions, have all that information provided, and have the answers in such a holistic way that we leave nothing behind us when it comes to finding the solution and getting the just transition deputy. So I'm not able to give you a granular
part of the
answer,
solution.
But if we had all these people in the room with a commitment to developing a just transition, you wouldn't be long about getting all the information you needed to find the solutions that you want.
Absolutely. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Eamon Ryan.